No way Aaron Rodgers just said this. He just revealed that he fully believes the New York Jets are cursed, and it begs the question, are the New York Jets cursed, or is it just Woody Johnson? And we're going to break this down and discuss Aaron Rodgers' views on the way the season's gone amidst just what this season's become. So what's up, guys? Welcome back to Jets Digest. It's Chris and Matt here, and we're going to jump right into things as usual. Guys, if you like the content, make sure to subscribe. It helps us out a lot, but also let's talk about the Jets. Look, here's the deal. We all know the Jets have been bad for a while. That's not news to anyone. But Aaron Rodgers, since he came here, has had just two disappointing seasons in a row, whether it's been the injury or whether it's just been not playing well and the team not clicking, despite the fact that they have one of the best rosters in football. Now, Aaron Rodgers spoke on this, and he said it might be some sort of curse we've got to snap. Well, whatever the case, this team, this organization is going to figure out how to get over the hump at some point. And on top of that, he spoke about the culture and said that the culture is built by the players and that there's a framework set down by the organization, by the upper ups, meaning ownership, by the staff. But in the end, it's the players that make it come to life. At some point, everybody is going to have to figure out what the special sauce is to turn those games that should be wins into wins. Well, it's too late this season, obviously, Matt, and the way Rodgers says that, it does make you feel like it seems like he wants to come back and be the guy to snap this Jets cold spell of missing the playoffs for 14 straight years, which is the longest right now, the longest standing streak in North American sports. It's going to have to go a good amount of time before it breaks the record in total, which I want to say is somewhere in the 20s. But Matt, obviously, it doesn't feel like the Jets are cursed. It feels like they have terrible ownership.
I absolutely agree with you. This ownership looks like they are trying to beat, I believe it's the Washington Redskins 25 years in a row of no playoffs, which is like impossible. But hey, the number 2 on that list of the worst playoff droughts in NFL history is the Pittsburgh Steelers. And we know the Pittsburgh Steelers today, they have a great franchise, great traditions, only 3 head coaches in the history of the franchise, even with that 25-year playoff drought, which kind of doesn't make sense to me, but it is what it is. So you can get this thing turned around, but we got to get Woody Johnson out of here. The team is not cursed. Woody Johnson, the problem is he makes these quick decisions that we always talk about. This has been a perfect year to see what kind of decisions Woody Johnson is prone to making. He just, every time he hires a GM, he hires a head coach, but then he doesn't actually let those guys GM and coach. Robert Saleh was forced to bench Tony Adams at safety. There's no other owner in the league that would ever make a call like that. The ownership should not have any call on who starts or who doesn't. The only small little caveat where they can would be like John Mara, who's the owner of the Giants, with Eli Manning situation, because then the owner could say it's okay to bench Eli Manning or not when he was at the end of his career that last year where he was on his way out, but it was still a huge deal that he was benched. But a guy compared to Eli Manning, Tony Adams is a nobody. I'm not calling him a nobody, but he is not important in the grand scheme of the New York Jets franchise history. So he is not a player that Woody Johnson should be ever talking about when it comes to starting him or sitting him. And that goes for every single player on the New York Jets roster right now. They have no player that's like a long-term, all-time great Jet. We have not had anyone like that recently. So Woody Johnson, he cannot make these decisions on a coaching level, on a GMing level. We just saw him go over Joe Douglas's head to fire Robert Saleh without even talking to his GM, who he hired, who has made good draft picks, made good decisions. We went over that great piece by The Athletic, was talking about all all the moves by Woody Johnson. I don't want to call them his mistakes, because everything he does is a mistake pretty much. Every time he tries to change something with the team, it's always the wrong move. He has to let the guys that he hires actually do their jobs. The Jets are not cursed. It's Woody Johnson. He needs to let people do their jobs. Right now, we need a new head coach. We need a new GM. People are not going to want that job because they know Woody Johnson is going to interfere with them and make it look like the GM did a worse job of GMing and the head coach did a worse job of coaching. But you don't know what moves were actually the GM's moves and what moves were made by Woody Johnson. No other owner makes the decisions that he makes. No other owner is having this kind of effect on their team. They're not Woody Johnson needs to stop pretending like he knows everything that's going on and just admit that he doesn't know how to run a football team. And that's okay, because he can hire people who do know how to run football teams. He can hire a good GM. He can hire a good head coach. The team culture a team can't have a culture if they don't have a head coach. Bringing in an interim guy, sure, maybe it can potentially bring the locker room closer together, but they're not going to have a winning culture because the interim head coach is brought in only in times of dire times, and it's never going to be a good situation. He's, of course, never going to be inheriting a good roster. This was probably one of the better rosters an interim head coach has ever acquired, and, of course, he's falling flat on his face with it because he wasn't prepared to get this job. He was prepared to be a defensive coordinator. He was great at that. The Jets' defense was so good when Jeff Ulbrich was the defensive coordinator and Robert Saleh was the head coach. We got rid of Robert Saleh and have won one single game since. I think it's obvious. We were saying it before. We didn't really come out and say, like, don't fire Saleh, but we knew that firing Saleh was bad news. It was not the right move. I mean, 2-3, yeah, the team didn't look as good as we wanted it to, but maybe they could have made the end of the playoffs. Maybe they could have done something instead of had what is easily the most disappointing year in probably all of franchise sports. Just the worst year possible. When you take into the expectations and the results, has to be one of the worst years of all time.
Yeah, and I mean, look, the New York Jets right now, 14 straight misses, and this is the worst of them all. I mean, there's been seasons where it's like, okay, the Jets should be solid this year, and they weren't. There's been seasons where we knew the Jets were going to be bad. And now what we're seeing is just the most disappointing season really since the turn of the 2000s in general. Like, it's just been rough. And now the Jets, who have this 14-year drought, I mean, it's obviously the longest active streak in North American sports. It's not going to get the most in history unless the Jets miss the playoffs for another 27 years, because that's held by baseball teams. The entire top 10 is MLB teams. But, I mean, just looking at it right here, it's a 14-year drought. If they miss it next year, something that's likely, especially if they dive into the rebuild, that'll be 15. And then you're slowly climbing the list to where there's a tie for 25, and then the Steelers at 24, the Saints at 20, bunch of teams at 17, and then, like, you're getting close to being one of the longest droughts in football history. You already
is it 25? The 25, the Redskins?
Yes, and the Cardinals from 1949 to 1973.
And do you have the year of the Steelers?
The years the Steelers missed?
Yeah.
48 to 71.
Yeah, and then in 71, then they got their really good defense, and then they turned into a real franchise.
And then they haven't looked back.
It's possible that the Jets can do the same thing.
I mean, there was the time when the Saints were the Aints, but that was also a while ago. That was 20 years, and it kind of, I mean, they still didn't turn it around right after that also. But look, Aaron Rodgers is right to suspect that the Jets are cursed because he hasn't been paying attention to the Jets outside of the last, at most, 3 years. If Rodgers knew he wanted to go to the Jets and he's been paying attention to the Jets for the last 3 years of his career, many people, including us, have been paying attention to the Jets for way longer. So if you just start paying attention, you might feel like, oh, this is cursed. Like, it's just, if you've been around, you understand there is a consistent problem with the New York Jets, and it's the ownership. Now, Rodgers, he had a lot to say, and he talked about how the teams just, like, basically the whole statement of it's a roster, not a team, which is true. And Rodgers said that it takes an intentional effort to really become a team, and there's no specific thing otherwise if every team could do it. Essentially, Rodgers thinks that your best players have to be your best people, and they have to lead the way with their attitude, their practice habits, and their leadership, with the way they're talking to the media, with the way they're out in public. Rodgers thinks that's an important part of setting the standard for the locker room, and that it's a group that has to find a way to gel and spend time together and enjoy each other enough to take the work outside and to spend time and just hold each other accountable at work and kind of just let the ego go away. And on top of that, Rodgers also mentioned via the New York Post that he thinks the players should be spending more time outside of work together, saying they're going to hold them to a standard that's pretty damn high. Until that happens, you're not going to be touching the edge of the special sauce that makes the locker room have that really good chemistry. We just haven't quite figured that out yet, how to get the special sauce worked out. mixed up. It's close. There's a lot of great guys in the locker room. There's some good mix of veterans and young guys, but we just haven't quite put it all together. And I mean, this is reminiscent of what Davante Adams said in his first week here when they were playing against the Steelers and got ransacked when Breece Hall scored the touchdown and Adams got upset with the sideline for essentially no one seemingly caring or celebrating it. And he's like, yeah, this is not a winning culture. This is not what winners do. You guys have been literally programmed to be okay with losing because that's all you know if you've been on the Jets your whole career. And, I mean, we're now seeing it from another guy who was on the Packers, who's very close with Davante Adams. The two have been essentially living together. And, I mean, we've seen, like, it was a while ago now. Remember the viral clip of Rodgers and David Bakhtiari at the Bucs game when they tune the camera to them, and David Bakhtiari absolutely houses that beer. And then Rodgers tries to chug it and is struggling, and they're just laughing with each other. These people liked to be around each other. They had good chemistry, and they made the playoffs essentially every year that the core was together of those Packers teams. Now we're seeing a Jets team that doesn't care if their running back is going for huge touchdowns. It's just a team that doesn't care because it feels like they've been programmed to lose. And that's on Woody Johnson more than anyone. Yeah, the coaching hasn't been ideal, but as you said, we weren't saying fire Woody Johnson, fire Robert Saleh, because we know what happens when an owner fires a head coach in the middle of the season, yet the Jets went out there and did that anyway. I mean, Woody Johnson also, there's a world where his son is calling some of these shots, who's like younger than we are. So his
I'm
kids
choosing not to
Madden.
believe that rumor. I have to choose not to believe that rumor because if that's actually true, then
with the Zach Wilson stuff, I fully believe it's true.
Oh, I fully believe that's true. Now that we see the other stuff, I believe the athletic stuff is true too because every single move that they're claiming that he's making is right up his alley of stuff that we know for a fact he's done, and no other teams do it. When Joe Douglas, he comes out and he makes a Zach Wilson pick, which is like a little bit, it was kind of a weird pick for him. And some of the other moves just didn't make sense. Like they want to be a draft and develop team. So I know you didn't draft Bryce Huff. He was a UDFA, undrafted free agent, but pretty much the same thing as a draft and develop guy. The next step was to pay him the contract. There was rumors that Joe Douglas had the contract ready for him, and Woody Johnson forced him not to give it to him and to trade for Hassan Reddick instead, who, I don't know if you checked his stats lately, but I checked them 2 days ago. 0.5 sacks on the season, pretty good, after he was a complete problem. I really hope he signs for, like, the veteran minimum next year, or for nothing at all. It would make me very happy to see him just out of the league next year. But I think everything you said was really well said in terms of this quote from Aaron Rodgers, because it's obvious that the locker room right now doesn't have any chemistry with each other. We got a great basketball team in New York. Last night, Shedeur Sanders was at the Knicks game. Chris Gallagher is at the Knicks game. You never see the Jets players in the seats at sporting events the way you see other teams.
Terrible time to say that. Davante was at the game last night. But
Devontae's
it's Davante.
at the game?
Yeah,
wait. Who else was with him?
No one.
What other Jets players were with him?
No one.
Exactly.
So the point stands, and also it's Davante, the guy who was angry at the team for the lack of chemistry.
The point I'm trying to make is anyone can go to the game by themselves. I'm saying you don't see the Jets teammates going there with each other. Mm-hmm. Dude, I saw earlier this year, Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter, teammates at Colorado football, were at a game. I don't know if it was at the Garden, but it was at a game somewhere. If they're really like that, if they're really friends like that, and they really have that chemistry, they're going to be hanging out outside of just the football locker room, and they got enough money to go to an NBA game and stuff, so they're going to do it. But the Jets don't do that because they don't have the chemistry, and you can't force it. The problem is you can't force it. It starts with bringing in the right head coach. I think, that young core, Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall, Sauce, I think that group likes each other. I think they like Quinnen Williams too, but maybe there's something different going on behind the scenes. All I know is there's going to be wholesale changes this offseason, and we're going to be making videos for every single move.
Yeah, so you guys should make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, turn on post notifications, have a great day, and go Jets.